Now on the APEC VIP hotline, cutting-edge training for the serious athlete, apecgo.com. Joining us right now from Rattle and Hum Sports, it is the Big 12 insider, Kevin Lonnquist. How you doing, Kevin?
Good, Bryan. I like to think that we could probably burn the tape from last week after what happened with some of my feelings on a couple of those games. Since I grandly predicted West Virginia to easily roll at Tech and then Baylor taking care of TCU. How'd that work out?
Listen, buddy, I was 0 for 5 in my picks after going 3-0 the week before. I got nothing to say.
No, fire the writer, right?
Oh, man. And not only that, but I was 4-9 in my NFL picks. It was an awful week, okay?
Sometimes you get the bear and sometimes the bear gets you.
Exactly, yeah. So I got the wrong half this week, I can tell you. Okay,
no kidding.
Let's start first of all with the game in Austin, because the heat is really getting turned up under Mac Brown's butt right now. And if they lose to Baylor tomorrow night after what happened at Oklahoma at the Cotton Bowl last week, it's going to be like a barbecue tomorrow.
Yeah, that was a really pathetic performance last week. And I think I had told you last week, at least the one part of where I think I got it right was, I think I told you last week that on Thursday of last week, I thought Texas was going to win, and then on your show, I thought OU was probably going to win. I didn't think 63-21, and it wasn't even that close. I think what's really disturbing here about Texas is that the last two times that they've come into this game with Oklahoma, they look totally unprepared to play, not even mentally, not physically. Their tackling angles on defense have been poor. Their blocking is very soft. And the thing that Mac has always fought when they've lost big games on this is that their kids are coddled. It's a very soft environment down there. Their kids aren't challenged. And so when they put out a performance like this, it raises that question again. And he was asked on Monday about, do you plan on retiring after this year because of the way things are going? And Matt obviously refuted that and said, no, I want to get this thing fixed. And he said, I think that this team can still win 10 games. But there's a lot of problems on this team, Brian. Look at it this way. They gave up 36 points to Oklahoma State and won, found a way to win, credit them that. Gave up 48 points to West Virginia in a loss and gave up 63. That's well over 140 points in three conference games, which is like 42 points a game or whatever that ridiculous number is. They're last in the Big 12 in rushing. And you can't just use the fact that they lost Jordan Hicks prior to these two games as an excuse. They recruited enough talent down there that their depth should be such a it might take those replacements a game or two to catch on to what they're asking of them, but then they should be blowing and going. And then, of course, they suffered the big loss with Jackson Jeffcoat. The only thing that's been remedially good about the defense has been their defensive line. And then when you lose your anchor in Jackson Jeffcoat, that really hurts. And I really think that Baylor can win this game tomorrow. I've been kidding some people and nicknamed this the big pillow fight in Austin because the fact that both defenses are so dreadful.
The Matador game.
And I really think that Baylor can win this. In fact, I think I'm picking Baylor to win this because I just don't have any confidence in what Texas can do defensively. And I know that's kind of outrageous for me to say that based on what Baylor did last week against TCU and the fact that Nick Florence played his worst game at quarterback. But it's kind of like, all right, who's going to play less worse in this game? And I think that if Baylor does actually find a way to pull this off, that I think it's going to just turn up the heat. I think if Texas wins, then they can kind of catch their breath and say, all right, we're okay, we can finish the season strong, despite the fact that Texas still has to play Kansas State. But for Baylor, if they win, then they can kind of rescue their season and kind of find a way to get to a bowl game. It puts the winner in a much better shape to get to a bowl. Because don't forget, Texas has got to go to Lubbock in a couple of weeks too. So I think that it's a game that both teams really need to really feel better about where their seasons are going. And I still think that Baylor can find a way to pull this out.
Kevin Lonnquist from RattleandHumSports.com on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM. Staying with this just for a few more seconds here. I saw one of those ESPN roundtable discussions on ESPNU, and Mike Bellotti said something. Boy, I mean, it was the most damning thing you could possibly say about a team. But he said, he was watching, for instance, when the big fullback for Oklahoma caught the pass and went all the way for the touchdown, and you saw 3 guys from Texas who had shots at him and just kind of waved at his ankles. He said, I can teach tackling technique and I can teach you how to get in the right position. I can't teach courage. Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, to say that, to basically say you got a gutless defense at Texas, how do you fix that?
Well, that goes back to what we were talking about a moment ago about this team being very soft.
Very.
And that they're being coddled down there. Again, that's fair or unfair. That's the reputation that Mac's program has now. And I don't know if you find a way to overcome that. You either have it or you don't. And I think that's a cultural thing where a program is going to step up and the kids are going to look at themselves. Because sometimes, Mike is right in the fact that you can only do so much. The rest has got to come from within inside. So, all 85 of those kids in that locker room have got to look at each other and say, what are we going to do to get this thing fixed? Are we going to sit there and feel sorry for ourselves and pout, or are we going to work and be physical and try and push people around and try and change things ourselves? Because sometimes it's a case where the kids in the locker room have to take ownership of what's going on out there. You can absolutely, it's an easy target to throw the coaching staff under the bus. Again, sometimes it goes back to the players and say, you've got to figure out what you've got to do inside and say, how can I make this better?
Absolutely. All right, the bigger game with bigger implications is one probably not as exciting to the people in Texas, but it's going to be for the Big 12 title, it looks like, Kansas State and West Virginia.
Yeah, this can go 1 of 2 games. I love the diverseness of this game, Brian, because the fact that you've got the high-flying West Virginia offense versus the very methodical offense and approach of Kansas State. I kind of liken it to Aesop's fable, the tortoise and the hare, where you've got, and Geno Smith, he's coming off a really tough performance at Tech last week. I think the game lost a little bit of its spark because the fact that West Virginia lost last week. It's still a big game. I think what can happen here is that if Kansas State wins this game, which they're very capable of doing. We saw them win in Norman a couple weeks ago. But if Kansas State wins this game, they basically have control of the Big 12 conference race. If they don't, and West Virginia finds a way to grab it, then you've got the potential of 5 teams being tied for first after tomorrow because the winner of the Tech TCU game is going to have 1 loss. If Oklahoma State beats Iowa State tomorrow, they're going to have 1 loss. Presuming Oklahoma takes care of Kansas, that's going to be 1 loss. So you're going to have a big scramble there. I think what's going to be key is how well Kansas State's offensive line can control the line of scrimmage. We've seen where West Virginia's defense, if you look at them statistically in the Big 12, they're having a really rough go of it. They're giving up, and that was the one question mark going into the season, was how well West Virginia's defense was going to hold up this year. Well, it's not holding up very well, as we've seen. And if Kansas State, though, in its very vast different approach to the game offensively, but if they're physically running people over and they push West Virginia off the ball, they can win this game and win it by maybe a touchdown, 10 points. What's really funny, though, Brian, is when you look at the Big 12 stats on Kansas State is you got John Hubert, who's among the Big 12 leading rushers, and then right behind him is Colin Klein, their quarterback. And that's just what you love about Kansas State. They don't beat themselves. They're very methodical in how I've used that word several times here, but you just love it. They're patient. They don't get panicked. They're rattled. They're confident in what they do. I mean, you got to love an approach by a team like that.
Is Texas Tech for real?
You have to think so. That was the most impressive performance of the Big 12 teams last week, was how they took care of West Virginia. And again, people will say, well, West Virginia, you probably could see this coming because this is back-to-back road trips to Texas and the travel and things like that. But it is still West Virginia's offense that's made the national rounds and made all the headlines. And for Art Kaufman, Tech's new defensive coordinator, shutting Geno Smith down like they did. Now, the one thing is that Tech didn't do is that they didn't create any turnovers, but they were getting them off the field. And the one thing in today's college football environment is that you're going to give up a lot of yards here and there and some third down conversions that make you scratch your head. But as long as you keep them out of the end zone, which Tech did, you're going to win some football games, and that's why Tech did. I have to think now that Tech really got it going here. Now they're going to face a team at TCU who also feels a lot better about itself because the Horned Frogs, as we talked about last week, Brian, the way that I just had this sense then that they were going to kind of exhale with all the Casey Paul Hall stuff behind them. And they looked like a team that was much more relaxed when they played Baylor. And the one challenge, though, that Trevon Boykin will provide for Tech is that he's probably the most dual-threat quarterback that Tech's defense is going to face this year, so far this year, because Geno Smith isn't the runner that Trevon Boykin is. So Tech's going to have to account for him taking off with the football when the situation calls for it. If they can kind of contain him, then I think Tech can win the game. But I think it's a real 50-50 game in Fort Worth.
Okay, and we got about a minute. Iowa State and Oklahoma State, both these teams still have something to play for here. Oklahoma State's still in title contention.
Absolutely. I think that Iowa State is also they're a really solid football team. They played a really good game against Kansas State. They just lost. And Jared Barnett remains the starting quarterback, which is good news. Maybe they've got some stability in the quarterbacking situation, but that can always change next week. I think one thing that you have to look for is how well Oklahoma State's offensive line plays in this game. Mike Gundy was real critical of the way they played at Kansas last week. So if their offensive line can hold up and give either J.W. Walsh or Wes Lunt the time, then Oklahoma State can win the game. But I wouldn't be a bit surprised if the Cyclones win that football game down at Stillwater.
Okay, and then Oklahoma has an open date this week with Kansas.
Yeah, you could call it a trap game because of the fact they've got Notre Dame next week.
Yeah.
No. But they should take care of them. I mean, Kansas is going to play Charlie Weiss said he's going to play both of his quarterbacks, Michael Cummings and Dane Christ, who was the starter. I don't see how Kansas stays in this. Of course, if you turn the ball over, and that happens a lot. If you turn the ball over a ton of times, you're going to put yourself in a bad spot. But I absolutely think that Oklahoma, who really looks like they've got their second win now, and they look like they're the real deal. They might be one of the 2 or 3 best one-loss teams in the country now. I think Oklahoma should take care of the Jayhawks fairly easily.
Well, hopefully we'll have a lot better luck with our picks this weekend, Kevin. It's got to be better.
Yeah, let's just don't have a Viking funeral type of ceremony after what happened from last week. So anyway, Brian, I always appreciate your time.
Hey, great stuff, Kevin. We appreciate it. Love reading your stuff and rattleandhumsports.com. Kevin Lonnquist, the Big 12 insider for Rattle and Hum Sports on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live 99.3 Talk FM.